Well, National Coordinator, Legal Defense and Assistance Project Leader Chino Obiagu, a senior advocate of Nigeria, joins me now to talk more on this. Good morning, and thank you for joining us on TVC Breakfast.
Good morning.
Before the president signed the initial COVID-19 regulations, there were controversies raised by legal luminaries like yours, your colleagues. But then that was the president later made the regulations based on the Quarantine Act of 2004. And based on that, and then there was an extension, and now we have another COVID-19 regulations #2. But from the first that he has signed, how effectively, based on the provisions of the law, have we, explored the provisions to effectively curb the spread of COVID-19?
Yes, thank you. I think the Quarantine Act, which is, of course, made in 1933, the colonial law, provides for the president to take action in times of public health emergency. Once a disease is declared as pandemic or a plague under the Act, then measures can be taken to curb the spread of that. So the regulation was made under the Quarantine Act, and I think it is proper. However, there is a concern that the Quarantine Act is not broad enough to allow the president to restrict movement of everybody, because the Constitution guarantees the right to freedom of movement. Whether the president can, on the Quarantine Act, make a regulation that have effect across the country, are issues that have been raised. But I think personally that the Quarantine Act Section 2 and 4 particularly gives the president the power to take action, to take any measure to curb the spread of such disease in order to protect public health.
You said that there are some issues. I'd like for you to expatiate on the concerns that you are talking about for viewers to better understand what these concerns are and how it can be addressed at this point.
Well, the concern is that the Constitution of Nigeria is a ground norm. In other words, it is the law that is far above every other law. So any law that is in conflict with that Constitution should be set aside, including such laws as the Quarantine Act. Now, the Constitution has provided in Section 37, 38, 39 the freedom of movement, the freedom of association, the freedom of assembly, that every Nigerian has a right to move around. Every Nigerian has a right to associate with anybody or assemble. That is a fundamental right that cannot be taken away by ordinary legislation, except, of course, the Constitution also provides that, the rights in this Constitution are not absolute. They can be taken away, in such circumstances by a law that is justifiable in a democratic society. And that's the provision, that's the exemption. So the question is, the regulation made, which restricts movement, which is a restriction on the right to freedom of movement, right to freedom of assembly and association of Nigerians. Those restrictions, are they justifiable in a democratic society? And if they are, then the exception is acceptable. If they are not, then the exception are not acceptable under the Constitution. And
but are you saying that in this case where there is a spread of infectious disease for which the Quarantine Act stands for, is not justifiable to perhaps deny persons of their rights to movement and ensure that they are safe and alive?
On the contrary, my position, which some of my colleagues disagree with, but I think is just that it is justifiable in a democratic society to restrict movement, to restrict, curtail the right in the Constitution, the right to movement, in order not to allow the public health emergency, not to allow COVID-19 to spread. So I think the restriction in the regulation is justifiable in a democratic society. But having said that, and the point has to be made that some of the points being made in respect to Lagos State regulation, because if you look at the Lagos State regulation, it contains sanctions. And unlike the federal regulation that does not contain such penalties. And the question is, can the executive make regulation that has sanction without the resolution of the House of Assembly. And that has been the point.
All right, Chino Obiago, Senior Advocate of Nigeria, will leave the discussion here at this point. Thank you so much for speaking with us. It's time to talk.